Please join your hearts with mine in prayer. Almighty and everlasting God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight and in keeping with the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Amen. There's a strange light in the sky tonight. For the last 60 years, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, has been tracking Santa Claus' epic journey across the night sky, bringing all of the latest aerospace tracking technology of the U.S. military-industrial complex to bear. They can tell you exactly where the jolly man in the red suit is at any given time tonight. You can look it up on their website. Not to be outdone, of course, Google is also using its impressive mapping software to locate the elusive St. Nick and report on his whereabouts. My 4-year-old son, Ethan, is pretty excited about all of this. He's already been to see Santa Claus 3 times this year, as he keeps remembering new things that he forgot to ask him for Christmas. Now he can stalk him online, too. Naturally, Santa Claus isn't NORAD's only concern. No, they're in the business of keeping their eyes on the skies all year round and investigating any unusual aeronautical activity. Just this past September, they were working with the local police in Summit County, Colorado, to identify 3 strange lights zipping through the sky. Unidentified flying objects. UFOs, to use the parlance of NORAD and conspiracy theory enthusiasts. When I was in the 5th grade, I was pretty convinced that I saw a UFO in my schoolyard. Not actually in the schoolyard, but high in the sky above it. I watched this funny-looking thing trace a swift, smooth arc across the sky and then disappear behind a nearby building. Nowadays, you'd assume it was a drone, right? But this is 25 years ago. I tried to tell my classmates, who already thought I was a little strange, and not a single one of them believed me. Now, generally speaking, most people aren't inclined to take the idea of visitors from another world very seriously. In retrospect, I even doubt my own memories. What I saw that day in the schoolyard was probably just a product of stress and an overactive imagination, which also explains the colony of small gnomes who live and work on the bookshelf in my office. But what if there really are other worlds out there? Parallel universes, alternate dimensions, heavenly realms. We know that Santa Claus heralds from the North Pole, but what about the baby Jesus? If he's not from around here, where does he come from? When my children were born, I wondered the same thing. Where do babies come from? I have no idea. Well, I have some idea, but what I mean is, I wonder if we didn't exist in some form, someplace else before being born on earth. The same place to which we'll one day return. That's what we believe about Jesus, that he emerged from heaven, that the manger in Bethlehem was nothing less than a portal between worlds, a thin place, as the Irish say. A place where heaven and earth are just a little bit closer. The veil between them is gossamer as a spider's web. A couple of months ago, something really remarkable happened in the Chinese town of Foshan. Onlookers were stunned to see something materializing in the sky. Emerging from the clouds, they saw this dizzying array of shadowy skyscrapers. There was a whole city up there, just hovering amongst the clouds for several minutes. 5,000 witnesses saw it, and a few days later, the spectral city appeared again in the Jiangxi province, Photographs and video footage was taken. If you haven't seen it, it's really a sight to behold. Now, of course, some have suggested that a parallel universe had briefly opened up, revealing a world beyond every known dimension of time and space. Naturally, some really smart people had to go and spoil the magic, claiming that this was a very specific variety of optical illusion. It's called a Fata Morgana, named after the legendary Arthurian sorceress Morgan Le Fay, who was a master of illusions. Now, I can't really explain it, but it's basically a rare and enormously complex trick of the light in which distant objects are distorted and even inverted and magnified, creating a strange mirage on the horizon. A perfectly rational explanation. But I'm going to go with parallel universe on this one. I mean, what of Bethlehem? What of the Christmas star, that radiant light soaring in the heavens the night Jesus was born? Was that an optical illusion? Or was it really light from another world? Well, even if you don't believe in the multiverse or other dimensions, you don't have to look far to find other worlds right here on Earth, right here in this room. In a sense, each of us inhabits a universe unto itself. Locked as we are in our own minds and bodies and experience, people in different countries, even different parts of town, may inhabit a very different world than we do. Since he started attending preschool, it's become clear to me that my son inhabits a whole other world when he's there. It's like he's living a double life, one that I know almost nothing about. He's got friends that I don't know. He does things all day that he won't talk about. His teacher is called Miss Sarah, and he says that her last name is Perfect. Miss Sarah Perfect, but that seems unlikely. He also says that she lives in the attic of the school, which is an even more dubious claim. Every day I ask him what he did in school, and all he'll say is that it's a secret, if he says anything at all. I mean, it seems like he's having a great time. He's really enjoying himself. I'd love to know more. But all I get are these rare glimpses, maybe an art project that he brings home, or some random cryptic remark about his world. Miss Sarah set the pancakes on fire today, he once commented out of nowhere. He often says things like this, completely out of context, that he refuses to elaborate on any further. My friend at school is named Eddie Mira, he tells me, but we call him Eddie Spaghetti. And then there was the most random comment of all, my personal favorite. A grown-up girl threw up in the garbage can yesterday. What does that mean? Last Monday, Santa Claus visited his school, and parents were invited to attend. So we did. It was good to get a better view into my son's world. He introduced my wife and I to all of his little friends. He showed us around. His hospitality really helped to make me feel welcome, to make the whole thing seem that much less strange and mysterious. I mean, and sitting in those little preschool chairs, I still felt a little bit out of place, but it was good to be there, to peer over the walls into someone else's world, into someone else's life. That's what Jesus does when he comes to earth on Christmas. He transcends the gulf between worlds, comes to meet us where we are. And as Jesus gets older, he teaches us to do the same thing for each other. It's easier said than done, of course. Anyone who's had Christmas dinner with relatives who don't share their political or religious views can testify to that. Our nation, our world, is divided along countless rifts. Christian and Muslim, Democrat and Republican, secular and religious, armed and unarmed, the left and the right, black and white. And within these broad designations, there's even more fragmentation. Muslims and Christians and political parties, they're not all cut from the same cloth. Sometimes it feels like we don't have any common ground at all. Sometimes it feels like some people are from another planet. A few years ago, I got to go to Guatemala with a group from this church. We have a long-standing relationship with a great organization down there, Common Hope. They work to provide education and health care for kids and their families down there. And while we were there, we spent a whole morning one-on-one with one of their social workers, visiting client families in their homes to see how they're doing. Now, the social worker I was paired with didn't speak any English at all. Not surprising, why should she? Here was a young woman from another country with whom I shared no common language and little common experience. I hadn't studied Spanish since the 4th grade. We came from two completely different worlds, and for 3 hours we walked the city streets of San Juan del Obispo trying to communicate with each other. We traversed a fair distance on foot between the homes of our clients, and we tried to converse as best we could. A few halting, broken Spanish phrases from me, a few uncertain English words from her, punctuated with lots of hand gestures and charades. I mean, it was obvious that we couldn't communicate by conventional means, so there was no embarrassment about saying the wrong thing or looking like a fool. She was patient with me, a stranger who couldn't be bothered to learn the language of her people before going there. Now, it's not like we became best friends or anything, but in that moment, I felt like we'd really made a human connection. The very act of trying to bridge two worlds like that in such a concentrated way, it was exhilarating. Difficult, sure, but well worth the effort. That day, San Juan del Obispo became a thin place. Of course, language isn't the tallest barrier that divides us. That's nothing compared to divides of ideology. And trying to communicate with people who have fundamentally different ideas about the world and how it works goes well beyond waving your hands around and using a few choice words. Well, sometimes that happens too. It's not pretty when it does. But we seldom get past the ideas that we're arguing about. We're fixated on those things. We rarely look at the person that we're actually disagreeing with. Really look into their lives and the experiences that have formed and shaped them. We're afraid to venture too far into that world. We judge their ideas from the context of our experience, our world, our universe. Sometimes it's as far as our imagination can reach. There's a couple of young men in this church that used to be in my youth group back in the day, all grown up now, who are still the best of friends. One of them is currently working on the Jeb Bush campaign trail, and the other has very different political leanings. I still have lunch with them occasionally when they're in town, and I got to see him a couple of weeks ago. And after one of them left, I said to the other, it's so refreshing to see two people with such wildly different political views able to discuss them openly and in a friendly way and still be such good friends. He's always been there for me, he replied. No matter what happens, he always will be. And that, he said, that's the only thing that matters. It strikes me as I look at the nativity scene this Christmas, just how diverse it is. It's not just a vertical intersection of heaven and earth. It's also a horizontal blending of cultures and lives. A collision of worlds, all brought together by Jesus, love incarnate. A thin place. Barnyard animals are hanging out with angels, and shepherds mingle with scholars and wise men. Middle Eastern refugees, the Holy Family, are worshipped by kings on bended knee. Beasts of the stable greet those of the field. Some barriers like these are hard to overcome. I mean, what does a sheep possibly have to say to a chicken? Feliz Navidad? See what I did there? God has the power to bring all life together. Maybe not under the banner of a specific theology, but under the reign of pure love. The manger was a thin place in more ways than one. Christmas is a thin time when our worlds bleed together, when families are reunited, when friends come together, even sometimes when enemies can put their differences aside. A time when love and community are more than an illusion, more than a trick of the light. A time when they're real. And so is the love of God, staring up at the world with wide eyes from that ancient cradle, bathed in the light of that mysterious star in the sky.